And first up, we have Heather Herp. She's the principal at Rose Avenue Elementary School, and her student, Angel.
Yes, me and you.
All right, Angel, get on up here. We are recognizing Angel tonight for the character trait of responsibility. But in his teacher's nomination, there were multiple character traits that were listed. So I'm just going to read a few lines from her nomination. Angel is an extraordinary person. Last year was a hard year for him. His dad was dealing with some different medical issues, and those medical issues kind of caused some worry for Angel and caused him to act out sometimes in ways that maybe he shouldn't have. This year, he has completely turned his life around, and he's doing it by just random acts of kindness throughout our campus. Every morning, he gets to school before school so that he can assist taking our kindergartners from breakfast out to the playground and make sure that they have a good transition. He says good morning to each and every one of them, and he has built a really great mentor relationship with these kindergartners during their transition. Basically, anything around campus that needs to be done, this is our guy. And he's doing it with a smile on his face. I mean, it's amazing to me because it seems like anytime I'm walking up to the office, there he is opening the door for me. And he does it for everyone. So if you come out to Rose, no doubt you will witness this extraordinary student shining. We at Rose are better because of his fine example of how he should treat others.
Next, we're going to recognize our MCS heroes. These are our employees and our volunteers who go above and beyond for our students and staff. So first, I'd like to welcome Handshell Principal Lori Jonas and her nominee.
Good evening. I'm Lori Jonas, principal of Handshell Middle School, and tonight I'm super honored to be able to present this award to Devon Greenhalgh. Most teachers have about 125, 150 students that they get to change the world for each day. Devon has over 900. She touches every single student on our campus through her amazingness, and I just want to read the nomination that I wrote for her. So Devon is a true leader at Handshell. For the majority of her position, she works as a resource specialist. However, in the past few years, she has taught a section of leadership. During Devon's time of doing so, she has implemented and cultivated school culture through dances, rallies, and events designed to incentivize students to do their best. Devon spends countless hours planning all of this on her own, ensuring details are attended to so that students reap the reward of a positive school campus. In addition to this, she does things that support staff, like organizing the entire adult school spirit wear each year. Devon's commitment to Handshell and our students is very clear. The time, energy, and grace that she brings to this position and our whole campus is commendable. We are a better school, and our students are successful just due to Devon Greenhalgh's efforts.
So that last nomination was a principal to a teacher. Now we have a teacher who's nominated a principal for an MCS Hero Award. So please welcome Elliott teacher Jennifer Grenbow and Principal David Hauk.
I'm so pleased to nominate Dave for this award. he came to Elliott as our principal 7 years ago, and it was a tumultuous time to say the least. Our previous principal had left in not a great situation, and there was a lot of mistrust and other things among staff, and he brought much needed stability and completely changed the culture of our school. More trusting, more academic focus. I mean, it was always there, but just really being a supporter of teachers. And it just completely changed it. We went from a 1-year accreditation during our WASC review previously to a 6-year on our most recent. And I mean, it's just night and day. And that is really attributed to his leadership. And he has a heart for kids. He seems kind of gruff and tough on the exterior. But one of my favorite photographs, and it's in the staff room area, where his big Dave, 6'5", is down on his knees tying the shoes of one of our little toddlers in our infant and toddler care program. And he just relates, he knows, I think, every student by name. And we go through students at Elliott. They come and go, and we kind of reach them as they're there each day. We try to provide the best they can. We may not see them again. We may see them all year. But we make sure, and he makes sure with his leadership, that while they're there, it's a home. The reason I nominated for him, I mean, that's enough in itself, but I'm housed at Pearson. I'm an Elliott teacher. I'm housed at Pearson, which is here. And the district doesn't provide transportation for my students. They're fifth-year seniors. And one of my students, she's experienced homelessness periodically throughout her life. And the family car in mid-90s, broke down in Waterford. Dave picked up the family member, drove all the way out to, he's a former industrial arts teacher, if you didn't know. So he drove out there, determined that the car couldn't be fixed, had the car towed back to Modesto at his expense, and then picked up the various children that needed to be picked up from school. They were all in the back of his car, buckled in, and made sure that they got, I mean, that's just the kind of person, he does stuff like that all the time. Gives the campus supervisor money to go buy a kid a pair of shoes, things like that, that oftentimes goes really under the radar, and he absolutely deserves to be recognized. I've been in the district 34 years as a classroom teacher, and he's truly one of the finest principals I've ever worked with. He is an asset to Modesto City Schools, and he deserves this recognition.
Thank you.
Tonight, for our special recognition, we have our teachers that were involved in the SPY Educator Internship Program that Dr. Noguchi mentioned earlier during her announcements. So to tell us about this program, we have Ron Dickerson here with us tonight from SPY, the Stanislaus Partners in Education, and he's going to tell us about the program before we invite our teachers up.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll be real brief. SPY is Stanislaus Partners in Education. We work with the school districts in the county to try to bring businesses and educators together, either through partnerships, and in this program, it's through internships. We budget for 30 internships. We now pay a $1,000 stipend for a 40-hour internship in the summer. The stipend's not really what is attractive. What is attractive is that the teachers get to actually participate with an organization and take things from their classroom to the organization, and then from the organization, they can take it back to their classroom so that they can have practical experience and give that to their students. They find out what employers are looking for in their employees. I believe this year we had 8 teachers from Modesto City Schools participate out of the 30 slots available. I hope we can have more than that next year. But anyway, that's kind of all I have to say.
Would you like to call them up?
Sure. Is Tom Arnold here? Thank you. And Tom, who'd you go with? TID. Alyssa Collins. Who are you with?
The Modesto B.
All right. Oops, sorry. I get carried away. I need to just pay attention. Melanie Gillum.
Hey, Melanie.
And who'd you go with, Melanie?
I was with G3.
Jeff Griffith. Jeff's not here tonight. Kirk McCall. Kirk, congratulations.
Stanislaus County Workforce Development.
And Yummy Soares. I always mess that up. Yeah, that's right. What is it? What's your name?
Yumi Soros.
Hey, I was closer than before.
G3 Enterprises. G3 Enterprises.
G3. Okay, thank you. So I just asked them just so you can see there's a whole variety of organizations, and there's even a lot more that we are able to place people with. Organizations are very happy to have the teachers, and the teachers have a very good experience with the organization. So thank you all. Thank you.
For our final recognition tonight, we have Dr. John Borba with CSU Stanislaus, who's here to present an award to one of our teachers.
First of all, I wish to thank you, the members of the governing board, and Dr. Noguchi for allowing me the opportunity to make this presentation. Each year at Cal State Stanislaus, we recognize students for their accomplishments and their contributions. And for 2018-19, we selected Jacqueline Hawkins as Outstanding Student of the Year in the School Administration Program. I recall last spring I was walking through the classes there at the college, and I walked into Jacqueline's class, and I told the students I was working with the California Commission on Teacher Credentialing about not setting the passing scores too high on the school administrator performance assessment. It was the first year last year of implementation. And Jacqueline raised her hand. She says, I want the passing scores to be high. I believe in high standards. So she not only set high standards for me, but she sets high standards for herself. During the course of the program, she stayed focused. She worked hard. She was very dedicated, conscientious. She did a great job. And for that, I wish to present to Jacqueline Hawkins the Crystal Apple Award. Jacqueline, congratulations. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to A8, approval of the consent agenda. I need to do a quick bit of bookkeeping here before I ask for board comments. I have a request to pull D4 out for a separate vote, and I have a need to move F2, which is an exhibit to a board bylaw that we'll be reviewing with B6. So, with that being said, are there any board members with comments or questions about the consent agenda? I'm going to hold up while folks clear out the room.
Okay. I wanted to pull the proposed draft, the AR 5145.13.
That's which number? T3?
E3, yeah.
Just pulling it.
Yeah, to
We're going to pull it off for next month.
discussion, yeah.
To discussion, same as D4. So let me, no, you're gonna vote, so I need to move D3 into the list here somewhere.
D3 was the immigration AR
Yes.
that trustee Irvin asked for to be pulled last time. It ended up in consent again, and that's why we're pulling it, putting it into discussion. There was a few words you wanted to change.
So unless there's an objection, I'm gonna move it below B7, which is the reading of the draft board policy for married, pregnant, and parenting students. So B7 will become B7A, and D3 will become B7B. So we'll pick that up after that one. So people cleared the room. So there's any other questions or comments from board members on the consent agenda? Questions or comments from the public on the consent agenda? Seeing none, I'm going to ask for a vote or a motion to approve D4, which is the board bylaw. It's the AR on extracurricular activities, so we're looking for a motion to approve D4. Looking for a second. Trustee Irvin, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Nay.
So, motion passes 6-1. So that brings us back to the remaining consent calendar. Looking for a motion to approve the consent calendar minus D3, F2, and D4.
Move approval.
And looking for a second. Trustee Brown, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Now you have to get back to the approval of the B, what am I up here? A9, stop looking at the script. Approval and order of discussion action items. Are any board members have questions or comments about the order? Action discussion items. Seeing none. Members of the public have questions or comments regarding the order of action and discussion items? Seeing none, looking for a motion to approve the order of discussion and action items. Trustee Newman, seconded by Trustee West. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Brings me to A10. I have no cards. So, I'm going to skip the script, being that I would be reading it just to hear myself read it one last time. Which takes us to B1. Student Representative of the Board report. Arnoff, you have the floor, sir.
All right, so just this last Thursday we had our inter-high meeting, and it's been a while since we had our last inter-high meeting, since the last one had to be moved. But I got a lot to tell y'all. A lot of schools did every 15 minutes, which is a campaign against drunk driving. Bayer, Enox, Downey, they all did it. I was actually a part of it.
I heard that.
So yeah, I think it's a great program, and I know not all the high schools in the area do it, but it's really impactful for the students. And I didn't know how impactful it would be, but also being a part of it, I really see both sides of it. So I think more high schools should try to get funding for that because it's really powerful. So that's really important. I thought that's great to hear other schools doing it. More on the lighthearted side, but a lot of schools are doing fall formal soon, setting up for that. And also just some more great programs. I know Davis, they had a cancer awareness week at their school, and they gave goodie bags to students who have dealt with cancer in their life, whether that be themselves or families and friends. So that was really cool. And also Downey did a breast cancer awareness month, which was in October, but I couldn't report it because we didn't have the inter-high meeting. But hearing about it now, it's really cool. They told me that they raised a little over $3,000, and they donated it to a nearby chemotherapy research lab.
Nice.
So I thought that was super cool. Downey also, they're doing a lot. They had a canned food drive, and they also had a toy drive, and they donated whatever they had to Salvation Army. And they told us at the meeting that they want more schools to be involved with that, not just Downey. So inter-high will definitely get on that. My laptop just slept on me. But yeah, that's something Downey's trying to do, and I'm happy they're getting more schools out for that. So that's really cool. And they also supplemented their Cancer Awareness Week with a pink out game, which a lot of schools also did. Schools are also getting festive. Gregori's doing Letters to Santa, which inter-high is also trying to do, but we're working with Tournament of Talent right now and other things, but we're also trying to incorporate Letters of Santa into our agenda. And I know this is another really cool thing that I heard. Mo High is starting something called Tampon Tuesday, where it's a group of kids who are just trying to get that going. They're having like donations of pads and tampons for students, and they got permission actually to have a pad and tampon dispenser in the girls' restroom, which I thought was super cool, and I haven't really heard about that before. So they're trying to get that started, and they're doing good with it. They got permission to continue with that. And then just for Inter High itself, we're discussing Tournament of Talent, and we're going through with that. We just started. We're like in the works of it, but we started that last time. And also, we extended another thing, not just Tournament of Talent. We decided to tackle the issue of vaping because everyone knows that that's a huge problem at the high school level and even at the middle school level, to be honest now. So we brainstormed a lot of slogans and possible like ideas and fundraisers we could do. One student in particular, Robbie DeMont at Modesto High, he came with a really good idea, I thought. He told me about how he's done some research and he's found some vaping smoke alarms that he knows other schools in the nation are using, and they're growing traction because they're proved to be effective, and you would place them in the bathroom. And the ones he found in particular are tamper safe, so kids aren't going to be messing with them. And I think it's smart because honestly that's where it happens most of the time, in the restrooms and where people aren't seeing like campos, so having that alarm would be great. Only thing is we have to fund it, obviously, and we were talking about we could raise money through fundraisers. We designed like a shirt, and we have like a logo and cool slogans we could put, and we could sell them out. We could get fast clubs at high schools and middle schools to help us with that. But yeah, that was just kind of an idea. But if we could get it developed more, and Inter High will get on that and get all the details. But I thought that was pretty cool. So yeah, that's all the deets.
Okay, so in reverse order, we might be able to get that Board of Education to chime in on some of that funding for that vaping smoke alarm. I feel like we could probably get a consensus up here on that. And then the 15 minutes thing is always kind of interesting because I did hear from my daughter that you were there. And then it turns out that my neighbor's daughter that I haven't seen in a long time because they're not my neighbor anymore, lo and behold, we saw the video and Mr. Hardy's daughter was in there with it as well. And very intense to a certain degree. But it certainly is informative. Any questions or comments from other board members on the student board report? Questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, back to the board. That brings us to B2. Report on Modesto City Schools 3-year professional development plan. I see Mr. Rich moving for the mic. The floor is yours, sir.
Can you guys hear me now? Good evening, board, president, board, cabinet. My name is Mike Rich. I work in the CIPD department, and tonight's my pleasure to present the general overview of our 3-year professional development plan. So the purpose of tonight's presentation is to identify district alignment to our MCS goals with our PD plan, identify the focus areas for our professional development, outline how professional development will be delivered and measured, and address our next steps. Professional development is aligned to our MCS goal 1.1 and 1.3, which address our needs to have great instruction the first time, as well as increased growth within our English learner student group. Our PD plan also aligns to goals 2.1 and 2.2, which address targeted professional development, as well as building the capacity of all staff within the district. There are 5 major focus areas of this professional development plan. These are broad categories that are comprised of many other facets that we won't necessarily be talking about tonight. First, we aim to deliver focused PD on literacy across grades and content areas. Second, we will establish and support an MCS high school math program that is not simply new curriculum, but includes instruction, curriculum, and assessments. We'll talk a little bit more about this in the next item. The math program will support teachers, students, and parents to maximize student success among struggling students as well as those that are high achievers. Third, our PD plan will expand a strong collaborative culture. When professionals work together to identify what students need to know, how they measure student learning, and what to do if students struggle or succeed, when teachers do this, it's been proven to lead to higher student learner outcomes. Fourth, we'll continue to support welcoming schools and strong customer service. And lastly, we will work to build the capacity of all staff members. These are kind of the main 5 focuses, or you'll hear us sometimes say the buckets that we're going to address in our professional development plan. Professional development will continue to be delivered in myriad ways to maximize effectiveness. PD opportunities will be offered in the summer, during staff development days, after school workshops, Super Saturday events, which is kind of a 6-hour event with different topics. Substitute release days, instructional coaching, which we'll talk a little bit about here in a minute, and pending negotiations through the 0.5% initiative that we've had this year. When looking at the instructional coaches model, we have several facets that we currently employ that offer high returns. Tandem teaching in the K-6 sites offers time to teachers and coaches to work side by side for several consecutive days to focus on the delivery of reading or vocabulary lessons. We've heard a lot about that in previous board meetings. Our next step is to take this model and expand our current offerings through job-embedded professional development. So let's talk about a little bit what that looks like. So the job-embedded model has 3 phases. The first phase, coaches and teachers meet for 2 days, and during this time they review current theory, research, best practices that are related to instruction. They plan lessons that will be co-taught in the actual classroom. In phase 2, the teacher and the coaches work together for 10 consecutive days on the planned lessons, implementing the different practices and things that they learned prior. They do this through a continuous cycle of improvement where they deliver instruction, they review it, they identify items that can be done better, and then they replan and they do that. So that's why it takes 10 days to kind of have a full cycle. During this time, the site administrator participates as an observer and as a companion to this process. And the rationale is for the third phase, which the teacher now uses their peer PLC at their site and the site administrators as an ongoing support for continuous feedback in this cycle of inquiry. The effectiveness of our PD plan will be measured in multiple ways. Most of these are related to the goals that we currently have identified. So increasing measures on our SBAC in math and ELA. So in our elementary, our goal is to increase our distance from standard by 15 points for the ELA, and high school ELA by 10 points. Looking at math elementary, we'd like to increase by 17 points and the high school by 10 distance from standard points. We'd like to decrease our long-term English learners by 3%. That doesn't mean we're getting rid of them. That means we're reclassifying them. There's 2 ways to change a percent. We want to increase our LPAC bands by 5%. We want to increase our collaboration and our PD attendance and satisfaction. We do a survey at the end of our PD. We want to make sure that that's reaching a high level for our staff and our employees. And we want to increase timely actionable feedback, specifically related to the CSTPs, or the California Standards for Teaching Profession. Our next steps with this plan include the formal planning of our summer PD options. This includes training for recent adoptions, strategies for working with struggling learners, including our ELs, and many other topics of interest. We'll continue to monitor the effectiveness of our PD offerings, making adjustments according to feedback and needs. In fact, we too are implementing this continuous cycle of improvement in our own PD strategies. We'll continue the great work of the Professional Development Committee to identify strengths and areas of growth. And lastly, we'll be working with our Math Study Committee to identify and implement the essential components of a high school math program. I'm available at this time for any questions you may have.
Questions from board members? Alex, Amy beat me. I was going to go, but Amy, Trustee Newman, you're up.
I think you went over this question. I had to do my notes, and I'm not sure if I did it based on the report or the PowerPoint. Page 9. Okay, no. Why don't you ask your question first? I think I went to the
Mine was easy.
point.
Just curious, because we had a lot of positive feedback in the previous meeting on the tandem teaching. Why is that only K through 6? Is it something that just doesn't work well at 7, 8, 9, 12?
So the tandem teaching was developed in-house by our ELA coaches, and they developed specifically to help address some concerns that teachers were seeing in the classroom. The reason that it's not in the 7-12 classroom is because we're expanding to make that happen. It's been proven to be an effective strategy, and we're working to build that through this cycle of inquiry to the job embedded coaching.
I just remember it was very well thought of,
Yeah.
and it seemed to make a lot of sense logically, in the sense that you work with teachers and your colleagues to sort of work together on what would be a good solution that's worked, and I think it's a good thought.
We had very positive feedback from all ends on that.
Trustee Newman, you ready? Or I can defer to Mr. Irvin and come back to you.
Go back to Irvin.
Trustee Irvin.
Yes, you kind of mentioned it a little bit about the continuous improvement model. So what does that look like? Because what I was going at was trying to figure out on the class, the different workshops, classes, and that you'll be offering in the professional development model. How will that classes cycle in, workshop? How do you determine which stay, which are which go, or which to focus more on? What is that? And I'm sure that's part of the continuous improvement model, but I was just kind of in a global picture, how did that look?
Yeah, so specifically, we're addressing that through the job embedded coaching. So that has to do with identifying. Let's take a class. Okay, so I'm a coach. I'm working with a teacher. We've identified some standards or an area, a lesson that we're going to work on. We plan it out. We look for best strategies. How are we engaging the students? How are we assessing them? Some sort of common formative assessment, or how do we have formative assessment to make sure we understand the kids are learning? We deliver that instruction. Then we talk about it. Hey, what went well? What could we do better? What do you think were some hindrances, or what were the great things we did? All right, now let's change that lesson. Let's fix those things that we think we can do better. Now let's plan the next lesson. How do those relate to this? And you just constantly go through that cycle to help kind of build and hone your craft.
Thank you.
You lost it?
I don't know what page it's on. So,
We'll figure it out. We can always connect back with the superintendent. Seeing no other lights, questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, back to the board for comments. Thank you very much for the work on the report and the update on where we're at developing professional development. That brings us to B3. Report on Math Study Committee update. Floor is yours, sir.
Perfect. So tonight I'm going to present an update on the work of the MCS Math Study Committee. So first I'd like to discuss kind of the purpose of this presentation. We're going to go over the purpose of the actual committee. We're going to look at the committee members, the makeup of it. We're going to look at the meetings that we've held, the activities that we've completed, and then talking about how we've provided some transparency, and ultimately what are our next steps. So the Math Committee has a dual purpose. This committee from the first time they were formed, we're told and articulated this. First, they've been tasked with researching mathematics instruction, specifically identifying areas that are working and identifying areas that are not working. Also, finding schools that look demographically similar to us who are outperforming the state average. The second purpose is to make a recommendation to the superintendent for math programming starting with next school year, with the 2020-2021 school year. The Math Committee is comprised, and I recognize this slide's a little hard to read if we're trying to read there, but it's comprised of representatives from 912 sites, instructional coaches, chemistry teachers, and I know you might think that a little odd, but chemistry has a significant amount of math in it, and they've got a big stake in that. Special education teachers, and we have also included several of our feeder district admin and instructors on this committee. All committee members have participated in discussions relating to the purposes that we've identified. Several of the committee members have been able to go on site visits to districts identified as exceeding above the state average, and we'll look a little bit at that here in a second. When it comes time to a voting decision, only those members that are MCS employees will participate in the vote. So the feeder schools are there kind of as an advisory group, not necessarily as a voting member. To date, the committee has met 5 times for 3 hours for each meeting. There are currently 2 more meetings scheduled on December 5th and December 11th. Future meetings will be scheduled based on the needs of the pilot teachers as we move into that process. So the committee collaboratively developed a survey that was sent out to all 912 math teachers, as well as those junior high teachers who are teaching secondary math 1, which would be considered a high school level course. Of the around 100 possible respondents, we received 57 completed surveys. The committee has also made 4 school visits, including Sanger High, Whittier Union High School District, Tokay High School, and McNair High School. All of these sites visited are demographically similar to Modesto City schools and have CASP scores that exceed the state average. The only exception to this was McNair High School, who looks demographically like us, but scores are pretty close to ours. And the reason we visited that school is we wanted to look at some innovative ways that they're providing intervention within the school day. specifically for mathematics. So we visited for that reason. The committee met on, the last meeting was November 19th, and they wanted to review the survey and the site visit data. From their discussion, they have identified the following preliminary key findings. These represent data that stood out as important when developing a comprehensive math program for our high schools. So from the survey, they identified that the current curriculum, lacks support for student and parent support. Students are lacking necessary skills. Curriculum is serving the higher achieving students. Curriculum lacks sufficient ancillary resources. And intervention for struggling learners is not working. We need to have an option during the school day. So these are things that came out from the survey given to our MCS math teachers. When looking at the data from the site visits, the key findings were as follows. A strong, well-run, well-established PLC was the key with commitment to the process. No matter what school we visited, this is what made them stand out. It was teacher-led. They use common formative assessments. They work hard to align to the CASP, and they use the interim assessments. This was the number one cohesive piece among all of our site visits. There was no clear connection between specific curriculum and student success. One of the things we wanted to do as we set out is, hey, who's doing well, and are they using a certain curriculum that we can then adopt? Every single school we went to that was high performing had a different type of curriculum from a different publisher. Nobody had a consistent piece. What was consistent was the way their teachers worked together to identify what the students need to learn and what they do when they didn't learn it. They also identified options for other math courses, specifically stats, maybe some CTE-themed coursework at the junior, senior level. They, again, identified intervention during the school day as being a vital component. They did not see a difference between integrated and traditional in regards to the success of the students. About half the schools we went to had one and half had the other. But again, the key factor was the way the teachers worked together. And the course, we need to review our course sequence option for all learners. Do we have options for those that are struggling as well as that are excelling within our math course sequence? The committee summarized their findings from the survey and site visits into the following 3 points. MCS must provide a curriculum that supports ELs, low and high academic achievers, and students with disabilities. The curriculum must be accessible to parents and foster parent engagement, and additionally, it must provide supplemental materials and support differentiation. 2, interventions are most effective when provided to students during the school day. And 3, PLCs are an integral part of a successful math program. They are most effective when they are formal, provide meaningful cross-curricular collaboration, and are teacher-driven. So this is the findings that the committee came up with. To ensure transparency, we put all the documents from the survey, the results, all of that up on our website. If you click on this committee links within right on the homepage on the right-hand side, you'll see those documents. The vision from the committee recognizes that mathematics instruction is not just about the textbook we adopt, but achieved by building a program that includes supports for how the curriculum is taught, how instruction is delivered, and how assessment data informs our instruction. There is a lot of work to be done moving forward to develop a high school math program. The work includes selecting a course sequence and pilot materials, providing all stakeholders an opportunity to review the proposed math materials, and identifying a core team of teachers to work on developing the systems of support for the coming school year. We are hopeful to begin professional development this summer on the high school math program. Again, it goes beyond a textbook, but rather encompasses curriculum, instruction, assessment, and explicit supports for students and parents. I'm available at this time for any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Rich. Trustee Brown.
I'm looking at the page that includes the committee members, and there's one committee member that stands out as different. Not a part of our feeder districts and not part of the district itself. Can you
So specifically referring to Don Davis?
Yeah.
So Don Davis is a member of the Cradle to Career math group that the county is running. And so he was invited as a representative from that kind of larger group of people.
Good. Thank you.
Trustee Marks.
So if we were to make the changes, let's just say a change is coming, pilot a program, how soon would we see changes in how the performance of our students? How soon would we expect to see changes?
So, great question. when we implement a new curriculum, the goal will be to make sure we're supporting teachers so that they can help identify what are the key standards students need to know, and let's focus on those. So there'll be some work involved in identifying that, on making course sequences, on bringing those to their PLC groups so that they can work with each other to identify those. One school in particular, Whittier High School, had a very unique model in the way they helped facilitate that. A lot of the teachers were really excited about that model. We might see that something similar to that in our district. But the goal would be to help them implement that new curriculum. At the high school level, we only test the juniors. So while we might see an increase in that first year, a sustained increase using that new curriculum might not be fully realized for 3 years out, just because those are the kids that would have been through that cycle.
But we also, don't we take internal tests?
So we
Don't
do take
benchmarks?
interim assessment benchmarks. We would be able to see that data as well. That is correct.
So for board members to see change, we could use that to at least see if our students are improving based on the new different curriculum or new model of working together in this format that you provided.
Correct. So currently we're delivering the interim assessment benchmarks this year to all the 912 schools. So that could be used as a baseline if you think of it that way, and then compare that to the future curriculum.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Newman?
If we were to go from integrated to algebra, geometry, advanced algebra, how would we implement that, given the fact we've got students at each level of SM1, 2, and 3? So would we start with freshman year, or would we, how would we do that?
So that's a great question. So we'll have new curriculum. We'll have a new math program to support all learners and teachers. So let's take each grade level one by one. Incoming freshmen, you just start them in Algebra 1.
Right.
No
That
big
makes
deal,
sense.
right? Juniors going into SM3, you just switch them to Advanced Algebra. By that time, they've had all the standards, right? We've had that. Juniors going into SM3. So sophomores, right, they would be going into geometry. If we were to do this, I'm not suggesting this, the committee has decided this, we would have to look at, and we've done this work, the standards that that student would have already missed, and we will supplement that curriculum to make sure they're hitting those essential standards. So the idea would be to roll, this is just a suggestion at this point, to roll them all in at once so that we can support everybody with the same curriculum and supports for all parents and all students.
And it would still be possible, even under any change. We're one of the few districts in the area that accelerate in junior high. We would still make that a priority, right?
Correct.
So that would mean that we would have high school math, whether it's algebra in 8th grade or whether it's SM1 in 8th grade, available
Correct.
to our students in our junior highs.
That is correct.
Right.
Trustee Irvin?
Trustee Newman kind of asked my question as well, but I was trying to figure out also what are the strategies that are going to be put in place to mitigate or minimize the learning gap that may happen between transitioning from one curriculum to another as well.
Yeah, again, valid question. A lot of that has to do with identifying what are the essential standards that the students need to know and building that curriculum. So just because we get a textbook doesn't mean we go from page 1 to page 400. We're allowed to look at the curriculum, identify what's important, and then teach those things. So there might be a few years that we have to work on, like those, a gap year, if you will, to work on identifying those standards and supporting those in maybe a stronger way.
Trustee West?
The evidence is pretty clear that intervention within the school day is most effective. Do we have any ideas how we're going to implement that?
Do you want me to bring up some creative ideas we've seen? Okay, so here's some creative ideas. Just none of this has been approved, so don't go out and be like, hey, here's what we're going to do. Okay, so at California High School, which is part of the Whittier Union School District, they're on a block schedule, and they did something a little creative where twice a week the block is a little bit shorter. They've recouped that time, and let's say a teacher gives some sort of assessment, and they recognize, hey, this group of kids got it, and this group of kids needs a little extra help. So in that tutorial time, the students who got it are released to go to nutrition break. They have a nutrition break or lunch. And this teacher then works with those students that need help right then. Maybe a student needs help not in the class that they have that period, but a different class. The teacher might say, hey, I need you to come to my tutorial and then come and work on that. So they've seen some success with that. At McNair High School, one of the reasons we went to McNair High School, also on a block schedule, let's pretend John and I are both teaching math. And John's got a Algebra 1 class, and I have a prep period during that time. So twice a week, the teacher on prep goes into John's class, takes the students that are succeeding to their class, and provides some sort of enrichment activity around the curriculum that they're currently learning. And John retains his students that need extra help and remediates right there, intervenes right there within the school day. So those are a couple ways that some schools have done it. We don't have answers to all of those. There's some logistics involved there that if you ask me, I'm going to say I don't have those answers. But we did see some very creative ways that was able to happen. We also saw some creative use of before and after school times, some things that we're probably already doing, but those were some during the school day items that really intrigued the committee.
Student Rep Arnoff.
I had a question. So, like, for the CAS, like things like the CASP test and like other benchmarks you guys give throughout the year, are those the main benchmark you guys are basing off like progress and how successful the current curriculum is? Because I know it's just for juniors, but at the CASP test that we get like during the year, I know like personally not a lot of kids take it seriously, and because I guess it's not a grade and they're just going in and missing class, and I mean I've seen people like sleeping and stuff, and like and then for the benchmarks throughout the year, I know they're like they seem very like easy in a way, and not I'm not sure to say it, but they didn't seem very as if like really testing the students' abilities and what we've learned. So I don't know if there was other like forms of like evaluating, and I was also like looking at the survey, and like they were saying that like, I mean most of the teachers are saying it's not effective. I'm not trying to say it is, but I was just wondering if there's any other like what do we distinguish like is the most effective form of like evaluating? Because the survey says one thing, but I don't know. You said the students are doing good based on the test, so.
So you've asked multiple questions there. So let me ask, that's okay. So let me address the first one. You've hit an age-old problem with teachers. How do we motivate kids to take an assessment? That's a difficult thing. I wish I had a really good answer to say this is what we would do. We do give, starting this year in math, we're giving an interim assessment. So that's the same company that makes the CASP assessments, make smaller 15 question assessments that we can give throughout a high school career. We're using those for the first time. And the goal isn't, oh, here the kids took this, great, now we're not doing anything with it. The goal is to use it in what we call a formative way. So we form our instruction based on the results of that test. So you take a test in your SM3 class. I'm the teacher. I recognize that question 7, only 7% of the kids got that question right. Now I know as a teacher, that's something I have to go back and reteach. So I'm not necessarily using it for your grade per se, but I'm using it to identify how am I doing as an instructor to help the kids learn. And obviously that question I didn't do well on, I need to reteach that question. I need to find other ways or other means to assess, to help them learn that. And then ultimately reassess that and verify, hey, did the kids really get that? So that was one of your questions. I think the other question had to do with how throughout the year are we using assessments to identify effectiveness? Again, tough question, right? So one of the goals would be as we work together as a group of, let's say you're at Enox, let's say as the SM3 teachers at Enox work together, they're developing some form of system that they've identified. This is the standard that students need to learn, and this is the level with which they need to know it. We use an acronym called DOK, depth of knowledge. So here's the standard they need to learn, and here's the depth of knowledge they need to be successful on that. We write an assessment together, we give it, we do the same thing. We use it in a formative way. How are kids doing? Did they get it right? Did they get it wrong? Hey, this class did better than this. What was different? What can I do better? That's about that continuous cycle of improvement, honing your craft, and identifying what kids need to learn, what do we do, how do we know they got it, and what do we do if they didn't get it? So that whole process is really, when we looked in here about the PLC process, that is how the teachers saw it successful at these other school sites.
Trustee Brown?
Yeah, so the sites that the committee visited, were there any districts or schools that changed from either traditional to integrated or integrated to traditional and saw a substantial increase in their scores or their performance?
So Whittier High School commented that when they switched, and they switched from integrated to traditional several years ago, that their scores went down. And the reason they said was they were really good at knowing how to score well on the STAR test, right? They knew how to work that system. And they said they realized at that point that they were doing it wrong, that they needed to focus more on the standards. So within 2 years, their scores were right back up. And they said it's independent of the curriculum they're using. They're looking at what standards do the kids need to learn, how are we going to teach that? And they use that curriculum, that textbook, as a resource to deliver those questions.
Trustee
So
Newman.
in the end, after those 2 years, were the scores higher than they had been at the benchmark?
So yeah, Whittier over the last 4 years have grown 10% in their CASP math scores.
Thank you.
10% of students exceeding or meeting standards. I should have said that, sorry.
Trustee Newman.
I just want to flesh out, you using the term intervention. I know that at least at Modesto High School, the math teachers make themselves available before and after school, and then at lunch hour. The onus is on, and at every day it's available, from what I understand from the students. And the students have to avail themselves of that. It's not, you have to go. It's encouraged, but I don't think the onus is on, the teachers doesn't assign it, as far as I know. So is that intervention? Are you calling that intervention, or is intervention during class time in lieu of some instruction?
Intervention would encompass all of those things.
Okay.
What are the options we're giving kids before and after school, or at lunch, wherever, right? And then what are the formal ways that we're able to, in their school day, deliver that intervention?
Okay.
And again, I don't have a solid answer yet on how that could be approached.
So we're looking at it just at any point during the day or before and after school that we could provide help. And intervention could be tutoring or one-on-one, or it could be a differential instruction, as you gave the example with John.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct. With the goal of intervening at the right time. Don't wait till quarter grades come out till they're already failing and the hole's too big, but intervene at the right time to make sure the students are successful with the learning, the current learning.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
We've asked a lot of really good questions about our math program, and a couple things that resonate, because as you've begun to know me and my leadership, I'm incredibly transparent in where we are at. And as a district in the area of mathematics, we can't just fill a hole. It's not going to get filled in a year. We would be lucky to see a change in 2 years. So to think that a program is magically going to do something, it's going to take 1 full year for teachers to be free to learn, to change the way that they're currently teaching, because it'll be a different program, to work together to identify key standards, identify lessons they don't need to teach, and identify lessons they do need to teach, all in the environment of not having that stress of we've got to get this number, right? Now that second year, we have all the tools, we have all the systems, and we can then, I believe we would see growth. Something that we're seeing right now with SWAN, as you know, we've got 10 schools that are piloting SWAN, and we've just finished their first assessments in this. And what we've seen, and I'll share that data with you here in the next week or so, the early grades that is doing SWAN, they're meeting and exceeding, and they're doing fabulous. Once you get to 4th, 5th, and 6th, we have more kids not meeting the standards. And in junior high, it's like 80% not meeting the standards. There's no magic bullet, even though I do believe SWAN is the key to fill the gaps. The further you get out, the harder it is to fill those gaps. And again, we're going to see great data on the front end with the little ones, K1, 2, 3, K1, 2, and then 3, 4, it gets worse. And then as I've said, it just exacerbates. So while, yes, we're going to embark on a new program in developing a program, not just a textbook, that's just one piece, to assessment, curriculum, and instruction. I just want to be full disclosure, it's a couple years out before we can really figure out how to fill those holes.
Okay, now to me. Could we roll back to slide 3? which sort of has the charge of the committee on it. Can we go backwards, sort of the beginning?
Sorry, I have it.
You have it.
I was looking at you.
I was looking at him. He looked like he was the
So was I.
driver.
I was like, hey, make that happen.
He's the driver. He said, at least my perception. Before I go there, Whittier, is this that Whittier in L.A.?
Whittier and down in L.A.
Okay, so completely off topic. Miss Odell, well, here's one of the things I noticed when I looked at the data, and the first person I thought about was you. Whittier, 93.3% Hispanic. EL's 5.2%. Might want to find out what that magic bullet is, because that's an extraordinarily high number of Hispanic students, and the lowest EL reclassification number I've seen matched up to that. So I do take notes that are off topic.
Just so you know, Whittier is a high school district only, so they don't have elementary grades in it. So that might be part
That's
of
still
it. They might be reclassifying prior to coming to that school. Yeah,
super low
It is
number
super
though,
low.
because we're running 35-ish at the high school level, if I'm not mistaken, and a 50-60% population. That number stuck out. I'm going to work in reverse from the bottom up. Make recommendation to superintendent. What got missed there in the previous slide was that we get included in those recommendations. The Board of Education's missing. And I just want to make sure that we're not getting left out of the loop.
So it comes to the superintendent first, and then I make the recommendation to you. That way I can add, modify, and adjust when it comes to the board.
Just felt like we got left off there. Where in the state of California is high school math effective? I didn't see that in the report. What did we determine out of sort of 7 months of sort of hashing that out?
So we worked with school services. They provided data for us. We looked at schools that demographically look like ours. Then we ranked them based on their success, their change, their growth, and then looked at ones that were above that line, above that state average line. So I can provide that data for you if you'd like.
Well, there wasn't sort of something they did. There wasn't because it.
So we then called as many of those schools as would take our phone calls. These are the 4 that took our phone calls. Most of them said, "We're busy, leave us alone." And the unifying factor that we did not perceive, we did not think we were going to go in and see this, was the way the teachers worked together. That was the way that was the commonality among all those schools. It wasn't the curriculum, it wasn't the course sequence, it was how do we work together as teachers to make sure our students are learning.
Okay, jumping up to the bullet under number 1, what are we saying is working with respect to mathematics education in MCS? As far as what was our takeaway in the report that says, what are we doing that's working? Because I don't particularly see that other than one point that I'll ask about if that's not it.
So some things that the committee felt were working, and again, this was from the data as well. We are seeing some success with the upper level students. I don't think that's a surprise. I think we would expect that with any curriculum that we implement. We are seeing that the teachers like the tasks involved. They like this idea of really getting into it and making some connections with some deeper understanding. But they also recognize that we're lacking some fluency to make those as effective as they could. So there are some trade-offs on that one. But those were kind of the 2 main things they felt were working.
I'll float this question towards Arnoff because I know what my daughter did. Do you feel like, as somebody who's a high-achieving student, that because we're talking about MVP at this point, correct?
The current curriculum, yeah, it would depend on what class.
Correct, but
what class are you in right now?
My astrophysicist, biologist, and future NASA worker over here is, I got faith. Do you feel like it supports higher-end learning, or does it?
I think that's my biggest problem, personally, with the Common Core or just the current curriculum, because I think at our school it's SM1, 2, 3, and then our highest class is Calc AB. And a lot of the kids, they're fine whatever through SM1 and 3. And then when they try to pursue a higher class of math, that being Calc, when they come in, they're pretty much it's really difficult for them. And how it works at our school is the class before Calc or pre-Calc, which is just SM3. There's 2 teachers who teach it. They're both actually on the committee, Miss Rubalcava and Miss Dodds. And one of them really loves Common Core, the other one doesn't. And they both teach it with it, without it. And it's pretty prominent that the kids who have Common Core struggle, it's drastic how much they struggle coming into a higher class like Calc.
I just want to make sure we're making a distinction between MVP, a curriculum, and Common Core, a group of standards. I just want to make sure those are not the same things. I don't want to confuse those 2.
Wait, could you explain the MVP?
So MVP is a curriculum that was designed by, it's called the Mathematics Vision Project. That's what MVP stands for. That is a curriculum designed around the state standards. So any curriculum we adopt will also be around the state standards. That's by law, that's what we're teaching. The MVP curriculum is a curriculum that we're using to teach those standards currently for SM 1, 2, and 3, but it is not synonymous with, it's the exact same thing as the Common Core standards.
The MVP, that's what I was talking
I just
about.
want to make sure we're clear on the distinction.
Yeah, the MVP. It's just, I've seen firsthand that it's not really effective, and students have a really hard time like trying to advance themselves in math in a class that isn't revolved around that, like calculus. So that's what I've seen.
So, just my 2 cents. Just a question back to you. What grade are you getting in calculus right now?
Sorry?
What are you doing well in calculus?
I did calculus last year.
You did last year. Did you pass the test?
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
So I think high achieving students.
Well, wait, sorry. I'm so sorry to interrupt, but
That's
like,
okay.
in my class, we all came in, and I think in my year, half the students just dropped the class, and most of the students were students in MVP, and the rest were, and most of the students who stayed in calculus were those who were under Miss Dodds, who didn't choose to teach really that curriculum, and she kind of went old school with the textbook traditional. I don't know. I just see that students have a hard time.
So just again, MVP, we do not have calculus curriculum. That's
Correct,
MVP.
it's AP.
And we've been using the same book since I taught calculus.
Yes.
So just make that distinction, yeah.
Correct. And I think that was sort of what I was trying to get at with Arnov, because if you were in calculus last year with Mrs. Dodds, that would have been the class where I have a bit of contention with this idea that it supports the high-end learners, because there were a half a dozen students who weren't prepared for it. And that's, I argued this 2 years ago when I was told I didn't know what I was talking about when I said we need an actual pre-calculus class. SM3 is not pre-calculus by any stretch of the imagination. I was told by SCOE that I was wrong and I didn't know what I was talking about and blah, blah, blah. But the point is, 6, 7 students dropped that class in their senior year because they didn't want it on the transcript. And I think that's part of this factoring in of what we do, is that you can't squeeze all these courses into these integrated modules and sort of expect everything to take off versus this idea that you can jump from 3 to calc. And Arnold's extraordinarily fortunate because it's difficult to get to calculus by your junior year. And he surely did something on the side to get there, because if you take the traditional sequence, you're at 1, 2, 3, your senior year at 4th year, that's A, B, and out. I'd actually be interested in seeing what the BC numbers look like 5 years now down the road since we've gone to an integrated model. I don't know that we have that answer now, but it would certainly be worth flushing out, if that makes sense.
You want me to tell you how many BC students we currently have?
Versus the past. I don't.
So in 14-15, we had 23. In 15-16, we had 19. In 16-17, we had 39.
No.
In 17-18, we had 30.
Okay.
In 18-19, we had 28. And in 19-20, we also have 28 BC students. So BC is the second year calculus.
Correct. So we go back to the survey. I think part of what the survey tells us, if I can get there, I thought that was part of the most productive part of the work that the committee came out with.
Yeah, the committee really enjoyed
because
that.
I think
word.
that
I agree.
it really should have driven the problem statement that certainly came before it, because I don't think the problem statement from the committee matches up exactly with the survey data, but I think it goes to inform what I would expect to see coming back. 80% said it wasn't effective presentation of mathematics. 90% said it was ineffective for supporting ELs. 90% said it was ineffective for struggling learners. Almost 80% said it didn't support teacher planning. 90% said what we have doesn't support technology. 100% said there's no support for parents. Pretty close to 90% said there's no support for students with disabilities. That's a pretty harsh reality to MVP. Would we not agree around the table? And I think that it certainly indicates that if we're looking at the current board policies we just passed, talks about proof, evidence of improving student outcomes, and evidence supporting the underlying education philosophy of what we're using. To me, that survey indicates that MVP should not be on the list we're looking at. And I'd certainly like to hear something from my fellow board members that says that we've at least got 5 or 6 years worth of data and testing that indicates we certainly need to be going in a different direction, if that makes sense. Trustee West.
I'm a little concerned that just barely more than half of the math teachers responded. So we have almost 50% of the teachers who didn't respond to the survey, correct?
We have 43% that did not respond.
So I'm really curious to know where those teachers are at and what their opinions would be, because that could change some of the data that we have if we have input from the other teachers.
Generally speaking, when you do a survey, if you get about 60%, that's a pretty good sampling size. So we were pretty happy with the 57%. I think it would have been lower had the members of the committee not gone out to their constituents and their peers and said, hey, we really need your feedback on this. And the committee was pretty happy with close to 60% saying, giving their answer, their input.
Okay, I'm just curious what the others would think, if they would be along with this, or if maybe their feedback would be very different.
I think the key piece of that I think didn't surprise me, because I've heard from parents. I've also had other board members call me. There is nothing for the parents to work with. It's modules. And I think one of the comments was made in the sort of the questionnaire point was when they asked about supplemental material, there is none. I think that's also extraordinarily difficult to work around. And I think one of the comments they made was, well, the parents could go home and look something up online. I've tried, and I can assure you that searching for a YouTube video to help your kid with math is not effective when you're looking for a textbook to sit down and help your struggling student sort of move forward or backwards. I think that gets much more difficult if we're in Arnold's calculus class, but my guess is if you're over there in calculus, you're not looking for mom and dad's help, you're okay. It's this idea of Algebra 1, setting up that foundation. And I think that's extraordinarily troubling, doesn't surprise me, and I think goes to the other issue that I'd like to see is how many students do we have repeating? My understanding is we have a large chunk of students who just keep taking 1 and 2 over and over again. They take SM1, doesn't work, take SM1 again. Take SM2, take SM2 again. I think at some point this doesn't become a teacher blame thing, it becomes a curriculum thing. And I've looked at other districts that have used this. And so I just want to get to a point where we get back to something that comes back to the board that has evidence of working, has ability for parents to get involved, has support for ELs, all these things that aren't there, not just in our district, but in the Berkeley High School District and a 160,000 student district in North Carolina that I'm working with that are doing everything they can to get rid of MVP, up to and including getting sued by the company. I'll quit at this point.
Go to the superintendent.
Superintendent?
So President Walker, the reason, the primary purpose for this work that began last March was that we recognized we were struggling. So we don't need to be convinced that we're struggling. We're struggling, and it's going to take us a couple of years to get out of this hole. But the work of the committee, I do thank them for their time and their energy and their thoughtfulness in working towards a recommendation that we can move forward. That all intents is to come to the board, and I do believe that we will get there.
Trustee Marks.
I just appreciate the fact that we're reflecting, reviewing, making a determination as to what's best for our students and how to go about that. I believe that the survey was really helpful in giving some feedback on what the teachers see as helping them accomplish their job better in the classroom, with some supports that help the parent support, that help students with disabilities, and then also help our higher end students to achieve at a higher level. So I appreciate the fact that you all went to other school districts, you looked at what they're doing, what's working, and then how to get our teachers to say, yes, we want to work together as a team. We believe that this will help in all levels at the school when we're working as a team. And so I believe that as you work through this, I'm looking forward to seeing what you're going to bring back, though I know results take time and it'll take us some time to get to that. But I appreciate that we're working towards that. And I look forward to seeing, hey, where are our benchmarks at this point with the students that we're motivating to try to take those, but to see how they're doing. And then some feedback from the teachers on that process. That first year I know is transition, it's hard. Anytime you've developed some program, you've been doing it for a while and you got to throw it all out and start again, and that's hard. But then the next year it gets a little easier, and and then as they work together, they find out what works for them. So I appreciate that. And I know I have a hard time with our, I see our students not doing well in math. It's very hard for me because when we changed from NCLB to NCLB in 2000, our students were doing really well. And in elementary school, they were doing extremely well. So to see us drop off that, it's really difficult. But I know we're going to get there again. And I believe in what you're doing and how we're going to get there. And I trust the superintendent and what she's trying to work towards. And it's a hard lift right now. It's hard to come into a district where you got all these low, things happening that you're trying to figure out where can we make it work and how? Because everybody's trying hard. Everybody's working hard, doing what they believe is best. It just hasn't made the progress. So maybe changing at this point is a good idea.
I just want to make a quick point of order. At this point, we really need to be just asking questions. I'd really like for us to go out to the public. We have parents here, which is really awesome. When I look out and see some parents, I'd love to hear from them if they would like to speak. So if we could hold, unless it's a question for Mr. Rich, if we could hold any comments until then, that'd be great. That's the way we should be doing our items right now.
Trustee Irvin, question or hold?
It's a comment and question. I'll let
We'll go to the public, come back to the board. This time we'll take out to the parents, community input, questions, comments from the public. Is there anybody other than my daughter? She doesn't have to announce. I can introduce her. Caitlin Walker.
Evening.
Oh, she's gonna go back.
Good evening, Board of Education. Thank you for allowing me to speak here tonight. I would like to speak on behalf of the math curriculum that we are currently working with. As a current high achieving student, as a junior, it is really difficult to see that almost about 40% of my class is still repeating SM2. 40% of my class is still repeating SM2 for either the second or possibly maybe a third time because of failing time and time again because there's no resources. And as my father has a high degree in mathematics, when I was struggling, he couldn't help me, which meant I was left on my own to find resources. But because my teachers at Enoch's try to be available as much as they can, but even still, it may not be enough. I have struggled SM1 and SM2, I was barely scraping by with a C or maybe a B in my math classes because it was so hard to understand. There were no YouTube videos out there for me. There were no textbooks out there. The internet didn't really help because there wasn't really a basic outline for MVP, I believe. And it just makes it super difficult on people like me and the rest of my classes. And I understand that it may be cheaper in the long run to go with modules and MVP, and textbooks are probably a little more expensive, but I feel like in the long run it is so much more worth it because a lot of textbooks in the back have the indexes of resources they use, which will lead to places where you can find resources to help get the homework done or links to books that were used as references. And I'd like to agree with my father as his previous comment of, and Arnoff here for the previous comment of about 12 people, I believe, dropped out of pre-calc on last year because they didn't want it on the transcript because it was such a hard transition between both courses. And I'd like to ask that there isn't really proof of improvement that I'm seeing because I'm watching my peers and my friends repeat years over and over and over again. And it's just really hard to see that because I'm succeeding because I have a very intelligent father and a sister who graduated with a 4.6 GPA because of all of her great, outstanding math achievements. And not a lot of people have that. So I just would really like to see a change from integrated to textbook. And I know that will take a little bit of time, like Dr. Noguchi said, but I think it is just really worth it. And it would be a great opportunity for people. Thank you, Board of Education.
Thank you, Caitlin. Anyone else in the public? Young man, you're more than welcome. I can't introduce you because I don't know your name like my daughter, but introduce yourself and you're up.
Okay. Hello, my name is Carlos Martinez. I can personally say from experience that I had to repeat SM2 from my junior year. And there's one thing I could say about modules that the only good thing I could say they do is that they're really good they're really good scrap paper. Really, they are. Because almost every single time we'd only use at most 25% of the module, and the rest might as well just be a bunch of scrap paper. And it just kept recycling it. And like I said, not really many resources. It's just the module, what you have right there, just that one chapter. You can't go back to chapter 1. If you're on chapter 2, you can't go back to chapter 1. You're on chapter 3, you can't go back to chapter 1. You're just stuck on that one chapter. You're just stuck in that one loop, and you can't really go back yeah. So yeah, there's a lack of resources. So, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Public comment? Not seeing any movement. Back to the board for comment, or now he's moving. Back to the board for comment. Trustee Irvin, I believe you were up before we went out to the public.
Yes, I'd just like to, now comment on the students, giving their perspective. I think that's an important piece of that. So thank you, Caitlin and Mr. Martinez, as well. I wanted to go back because my daughter is also at Davis, and she's a sophomore, SM2 that would be. And yeah, she says she doesn't like it, and the resources, she comments on the same thing, that the help available for it is not really there for her. And me, I wasn't strong in math, so she could probably teach me the math, even though she's SM2. But I would like to comment on the collaboration that has gone into the committee and their work, and if change is going to happen, it definitely needs to look like it's looking with the math committee, and looking at all the different variables that are at play when you're trying to make a change in the right direction. That they're doing, I think, an outstanding job of collaborating, getting our teachers involved, getting math experts involved, visiting other schools with similar demographics, rather than just make a change in haste. Just like, hey, let's just change course. I really appreciate the work that's been put into making this happen, and so I'm confident they'll make the right decision with when the change happens. So I just thought I'd throw that in there. But thank you again.
Trustee Brown?
So I want to echo something that John said. I have confidence also in the committee's efforts, and I appreciate the information that has been collected, and especially the fact that the collaboration piece is so important. And I look forward to seeing what the professional development piece will be, that will be running as part of what the solution will be, because it seems from what you've told us that success can only happen if we have our whole staff working together to make sure that they're focusing on the needs of the students. And to pull back to some of the information that we've heard from students, I'd like to just share a curriculum approach that I used when I went into my master's program, my MBA program. There was a course that I was required to take, and it was a self-driven course that was mathematics from addition, subtraction, all the way through calculus. And I had to work through that for a period of about 3 weeks, and it was rigorous and it was hard. But the good thing about that program, the textbook, and I'll share the textbook with Dr. Noguchi, was that if you failed on a particular exam at some point, it didn't just tell you to go on. It told you exactly what chapter to go back to and review and get the help that you needed. And that was a resource that was extremely helpful. So if we have some curriculum that allows that type of intervention for the student, self-directed intervention, I think that would be really helpful.
Trustee Newman.
I also want to thank the committee and the work, and I do trust that you guys will, in the process, I think that this has been a good process. If the committee is looking at what expectations, I'm not convinced one way or the other on the, I would leave it up to the experts on the sequencing of it. And that's the big topic up here tonight is integrated versus algebra, geometry, and advanced algebra as a sequencing issue. And so I'm not convinced one way or the other on that, but I am convinced of the need for textbooks. So, for whatever's going to be brought forward that I'm going to consider seriously, it needs to have definitions in the back. That's been brought to me by teachers. Definitions, so they know what the heck that means. What's the denominator? What's the numerator? I mean, even stuff as simple as that. Definitions, sample problems, and then as all of us who grew up in the 80s, you had the odd answers in the back. So you could be like, oh man, I'm really off on that one. Or I finally got it. So, some of that is really important so that students can help themselves or have their parents help them if they're able to. And so a textbook is key. This is not an ideal curriculum delivery device and I'm pointing to my laptop or this thing. It's not the ideal curriculum delivery device for math. Math is done with pencil and paper and with the textbook. So, my own students, I do have 2 high school, one are now a graduate, but we were in the IB program. So it's a little different, the sequencing. It didn't change when Common Core came in, and so there was a textbook. I just want to stay committed. One of the problems that we're hearing at Enoch's is about the fact that there was an acceleration in junior high, and that wasn't our decision.
Nope.
And I want to point that out. That wasn't our decision. That was
Nope.
a decision made at Sylvan School District. That's the primary feeder to Enoch's High School. Our students that are advanced and that feed from our junior highs, from Roosevelt and from La Loma, they can access the advanced math in secondary math in junior high. So if that encourages people to not pull an interdistrict, I hope that does, or to pull an interdistrict in our favor, that would be great. So that's part of what you're seeing. Perhaps there's another year of math that's needed in order to reach calculus. So those are my 2 cents, or probably 3. Thank you for your work.
Just in response to your comment, we have invited Sylvan. They have been a participant at every math committee meeting for that very reason.
Oh yeah, I know this is a decision that they've made, and I just want to say that I'm glad we made the opposite on that, so that we continue to offer secondary math in 8th grade. It's very, very important.
Right, but that would be the same thing as offering Algebra 1.
Right.
So just to track, I think it's easier, and again, they can judge for themselves. I'm not in the feeder districts. I think it's a whole lot easier for a feeder district to offer an Algebra 1 class to an 8th grader than go back and try to convert to integrated. I think my last comment would be, or 2 comments would be, 1, I think we need to think about what those different pathways look like. How do we create different pathways, as you mentioned, for a CTE pathway? Or for students who are going to be high achievers and do what Arnoff's doing in calculus versus somebody who's going to go get into the building trades, and sort of offering a data class or statistics class like you're talking about that doesn't go all the way to the AP calculus-based statistics. You can do a basic level statistics course and teach students how to look at curves and averages that will help them in whatever business they're going forward in. I'd actually argue it may be a better course than a lot of courses if you have an understanding of numbers and how they work and whether or not somebody's misleading you with a number. And then the other piece I would bring back would be, I'd actually like to see, after the committee is going to choose on the 5th, which course sequence they're going to use. I think it's worthwhile coming back to the board before we go and full on pick out a pilot and go all the way down the road. Let's review what you guys have got out there and at least get some consensus, because otherwise we're not going to be come back to until after everything's done, which I don't think is productive in the sense of understanding what's going on underneath the hood. I have no other comments other than that. But I would certainly like to see a report back looking at what choices are on the board after we choose a sequence, so that we can start doing our homework on this side, if that makes sense.
So it does make sense. However, if we wait until the next board meeting, which is the third week in January, we're not going to be able to get textbooks in line for our pilot this year, which means we will have to pilot next year, which means it'll be 2 years out before we do a math program. So we can have a conversation offline on timing of this, maybe using a special board meeting as part of that, since there's one of those in there. But I can work with you offline on what that looks like as far as the timeline.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Rich. B4, report on updated enrollment and intra-district transfer procedures. I see Mr. Miller working his way forward.
Oh, okay. Just click that. Back forward, okay. Okay. Good evening, Board President Walker, Trustees, Superintendent Noguchi, and Cabinet. This evening, I'll be presenting a report on the changes that will be made to our enrollment and inter-district transfer procedures. The intent of these changes is to make our procedures more transparent and user-friendly for our parents, students, families, and school sites. The purpose of tonight's presentation is to provide the board with an update and highlight the difference between our current practices and the changes that will be made to our enrollment and the inter-district procedures. I'll present the steps we've taken as well as our next steps. At the end, I'll take questions from the board and the public. As far as goal alignment goes, you can see these changes are aligned to district strategic goal number 3, provide a safe, welcoming, and respectful environment. The strategy is 3.4, to improve customer service for students, staff, family, and community. These changes to procedures are just one example of our ongoing efforts in this area. The first major change that we'll see is the implementation of online enrollment for the 2021 school year. This is a project that is in progress right now. It's not completed, it's a work in progress. Instead of going into the school office, parents will now be able to fill out their registration information in the comfort of their homes and communicate online with the schools. Once the registration forms have been completed, parents will bring all required documents to the school office to complete the process. The online enrollment process will be offered in multiple languages for those families who do not speak English. For families who struggle with computer literacy or do not have a computer in the home, we'll be working towards setting up a computer kiosk at each school site. Assistance will also be provided to those families who need extra help. During the summer months, families will no longer have to wait until schools reopen to enroll their students. The Child Welfare and Attendance Office will serve as a centralized enrollment center. This will help speed up the process and avoid long delays when the schools do reopen. Currently, information on enrollment procedures is difficult to find on our district webpage. Parents need to navigate to the Child Welfare and Attendance Department to find this information. We will be redesigning our webpage so that enrollment procedures are obvious and easy to find as soon as a parent goes to the main page. As far as immunizations go, parents currently need to schedule their immunizations with their private doctor or with the county health services. This may lead to delays in getting students enrolled in school. We are currently looking at partnering with Golden Valley or providing our own immunizations for district students. When summer ends, our K-12 sites have various opening dates. This can be confusing to parents. Next year, all K-12 sites will have consistent opening dates. It's something we're working on right now. Many neighboring districts have moved their kindergarten enrollment date forward into January, February, and even into December. As districts compete for kindergarten students, it's necessary for us to also move our enrollment date up to February. This will allow us to better plan for teacher staffing numbers at the various sites. With regards to Head Start and preschool, these programs will begin coordinating more closely with the elementary sites. We will also increase advertising of these programs at both the elementary sites and in the community. During kindergarten registration, information will be made available to parents and families. Let's see what I'm on. Okay, sorry about that. Excuse me a sec. We're moving on to intra and inter-district permits. As a reminder, intra-district permits are for students who move between schools within our district. Inter-district permits are for students who move between Modesto City Schools and another district. There will be quite a few changes to the application process for intra-district, especially for intra-district permits. I'd like to let you know the changes went through a process. There was a committee of principals involved, and we were looking to streamline the procedures because we found them confusing to a lot of the parents, especially at the high school level, and I'll get into that in a minute. Also, part of it was, since we redid the board policy on permits last spring, many of you remember, a lot of these changes were incorporated into that policy. But I did hold meetings with all the principals. I went to various principals meetings, got input from all levels, K-12, and this is one of the few times where we have a really strong consensus on making changes on something. Under the new procedures, this is for intra-districts. Parents will apply directly at the school they wish their child to attend. This will speed up the process and simplify the steps parents need to take. Previously, they had to apply at the school where they lived, so you had people going back and forth between schools or pieces of paper going back and forth. During the application process, currently K-8 parents must state a reason such as daycare, student welfare, etc. At the 9-12 level, parents must pick a program offered at the school of choice that is not offered at the school of residence. This can become confusing for parents who run the risk of a permit being denied because they selected either the wrong reason or the wrong program. Under our new streamlined system, parents will simply apply at the school of choice and no reason is necessary. This new system will even the playing field for families who find the system confusing, families who do not speak English, or families who do not know who to ask for help. This is also the system currently used by most districts throughout California. It's very common. Once students have applied for a permit, the application is screened and a determination is made on whether to approve or deny. The decision is based on student grades, attendance, behavior, and space availability. Beginning next year, students within our district will no longer be denied based on grades alone. This is a privilege that we will extend to students who live within our district boundaries. The criteria will remain the same for students attending our schools from other districts. In the past, permits were approved on a first-come, first-served basis. Education code now requires that when more students apply than there is space available, students must be selected by a random lottery. This is also in our new board policy. If needed, we'll implement a lottery system in the upcoming school year to ensure that we're in compliance with education code. I don't anticipate needing the lottery too often. I'll give you one example, like Insolent Kindergarten, they normally have more permits than spots, so that might be a place where we hold a lottery with a kindergarten. There could be, another school here and there, but it's going to be just wherever there's too many permits, not enough spaces. So it's not going to be all over at all the schools. The order, if we do hold a lottery, there are priority listings. Siblings will go first. Next will be students who have a parent or guardian who works at the school. All other students will then be selected by a random lottery. Students who live within Modesto City Schools boundaries will be selected first before students who live outside of our district. This was also presented when I presented the updated board policy. I don't know if you guys saw it. There was a lot of information in there. When students do not meet the criteria required to maintain the privilege of attending a school outside the boundaries of their school of residence, their permit can be revoked. The current criteria is based on grades, attendance, behavior, and space availability. Under our new procedure, students who live, once again, within our district boundaries, will not lose their permits based on grades alone. This will allow a student who's making good effort, attending school regularly, and exhibiting good behavior the opportunity to remain at the requested school. Unless there are extenuating circumstances, permits now must also be revoked at the end of the year for intra-district permits and at the semester or end of year for inter-district permits. This will ensure that students do not lose credits due to classes not matching up between the two schools. Currently, the site principal makes the decision to revoke a student permit. A minimum of 2 interventions must have taken place prior to revoking a permit. Under the new policy, request to revoke a student permit must be approved by the senior director, CWA, prior to revoking. I want to emphasize that transportation is still a responsibility of the parent. Next steps, we're in the process of selecting a vendor for the online enrollment. We have a committee formed up with the tech department, and Mark Herbst and myself are on the committee, and we're trying to select one. We will once we have it ready to roll, this will be for next year, we'll publicize the online enrollment to the community. One thing we're going to really start emphasizing, and this will affect people leaving our district for kindergarten and other, emphasize full-day kinder and our after-school program. We've really expanded the after-school programs. I think you've seen some presentations previously at the last meeting. We need to train district staff and school staff on these procedures. And there will be updated permit forms and procedures distributed to MCS families, and updated permit forms and procedures will be posted on the district webpage. At this time, I'd like to open it up to any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. I think Adolfo, Trustee Lopez was up first, and then all of a sudden I got lights everywhere.
Okay.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask about the, I think it's the first current practice session when this is current practice enrollment is handled through the sites, and now we're going to be doing online. And you did mention about the computer that will be available for parents that aren't tech savvy. But I like to point out a pushback. At that point, would it not be easier to do the old-fashioned enrollment instead of having a parent that maybe isn't, well, is, of course, doesn't have capability to do online, probably doesn't have capability to work a computer, and the extra help, maybe it would just be easier to have a hybrid where people can do online and old-fashioned as well?
Yeah, they can still come into the school. Okay. And if we're not going to sit here and spend 2 hours with someone going like this on a computer. If it came down to it, they would fill it out, and the data entry could just enter it. Yeah, that's not going to be denied. Awesome. It'll just help like a lot of families doing the online enrollment. And I understand because one of my former students at Hanshaw, so when this was all being worked on, I brought that up too. I said, there's a lot of people come in, they have a second grade education and don't speak English. Are they really going to sit on a computer? So yeah, we've thought about that.
Right, thanks. Yeah, and I mean, I think it's a great thing, especially online enrollment, and a lot of people it would be easier. I'm just saying that that we have incorporate the old fashioned as well, so there's a hybrid program for them too, for easier and more welcoming environment.
Yeah,
for them.
If they come in and they have no computer skills at all, it's there for people who use a computer and need one. Right. But yeah, if you have zero skills and second grade education, probably you'll need someone to. A lot of times I've seen those kids in my office, they have a teenage son fill it out for them.
Yeah.
Because the parents can't do it.
Right.
Even filling out the paper and pencil, they have to have someone do it for them.
No, yeah, I definitely understand.
Okay. Yeah, I'm very aware of that.
Thank you.
Trustee Newman?
Thank you very much.
I think these are great changes. I think this is really necessary. On the outside vendor type that is proposed for enrollment, currently we do, for our high school athletes, we have an outside vendor that we're using that helps us. You scan your things in, and it's been like the last 3 years. And people are kind of looking at me confused. Are you guys aware? I think it's been working well. I mean, I'm not an expert, but that would be a place to start. Yeah, a place to start of like how that's working. One of the key things I see with that is we've got, we have that day in the summer where we have the health exams that DMC is a generous health provider of those health exams. And we're looking at a health component here with Golden Value with immunization. So what we're doing there is a very applicable type situation to how we can implement this. And so some of the stumbling blocks that we've had, I would hope that we would learn from that. I know there was just a learning curve for some of us parents. Also, scanning in some of the documents was kind of difficult. So there's original documents for enrollment that we would need to do. And so how that works, and maybe even having some sites, some of our gymnasiums available with some computers and some people available, kind of the way we do it for our athletes. it's kind of an enrollment type, like an enrollment. Yeah,
Fair.
I don't know what fair. We have busing that we provide to that. We have 20, I think we used to have 20% of our students, our high school students, were engaged in high school athletics. So this is done at a pretty large scale of, 15,000 students, if like 20%, I think it's 22% now are in athletics. So that's a pretty large scale. So we've already been doing some of this on a large scale. So I really think there's some lessons we can learn there. So I really hope we look at that.
The athletic programs
Yeah.
use Sportsnet, and they do upload documents for clearance purposes. So there's still the opportunity or the option for parents and students to go turn in the paper packets, but for the most part, it's done online.
Yeah.
and there's a number of districts that have been doing online enrollment. Ed's going to go out and visit a few of those just to find out trials and tribulations. It's great to know we're already doing that within our own district. We'll be sure to circle back with Brad.
We several people on the committee had brought that up because they had children in sports.
Yeah.
And we were talking to the vendor about that, how we can articulate all of that with these sports. For the school documents to start out, though, the parents, the vendor even said, because I asked the question, because some of the local districts, they fill out the registration information, but they bring the documents into the school. And he said that's very common. So we're going to start out like that because, till we get a better handle on it, we don't want people faking. It's easier to forge a birth certificate and upload it online than to bring one in. Same with driver's license. And so we're going to start out with people bringing the documents in, but they'll enter all the registration information. It'll speed up the process for everyone.
Great.
But we're aware of the sports, but we probably need to take a closer look at it now that I'm hearing that.
Great. Thank you. I think it's a great plan.
Okay.
Trustee West?
Just a quick question. The web page will be updated to make it easier and more accessible to parents to find the info. Do we have a timeline on when that might happen?
I don't know. I'm going to say summertime. I'm looking at Russ because they're in charge of it. I can't really say when. Oh, that's soon?
Because they'll need it before the deadlines.
Some
The deadline pops up.
Some districts, you're talking about enrollment.
Yeah.
No, some districts, you go on the main webpage and they have a circle that says enrollment and you're right on your enrollment. Ours, you have to fish through and find my department to get information.
Correct.
We don't have any online. Yeah, we're going to have it right there on the front page.
I just want to thank you very much for doing this. When I worked for the Sylvan District with 8th graders applying for transfers, every high school had different information. So it's nice that it's all going to be consistent now, easier for parents and students to be able to, go through this process. So thank you so much.
The list of programs, is that what you're referring to?
That
was
even
like, to decipher that was like ridiculous.
Well, even the schools, we would, students would want to transfer from Bayer to Enox or apply for a transfer, and we'd call Bayer and they'd say, no, you have to start at Enox, and we'd call Enox and they'd say, no, you have to start at Bayer, and it was just confusing for the family. So I think this is going to really, really expedite this and make it much easier.
It'll be a lot easier.
Yeah, thank you so much for doing this.
Trustee Brown?
So as I think back to our history, and even this year, at the beginning of the school year, we went several weeks before knowing how many kids we had enrolled. And so I commend you on so many approaches that will hopefully cut that back. And part of me wants to know if there's some data that tells us particular schools, particular neighborhoods where we've had our biggest challenges. And then I'm thinking, is it possible for us to even add some additional layers of outreach? You mentioned the 15-year-old sibling that is there with the parents filling out the forms. And I'm thinking, gosh, how many kids do we have in our district who are dual language, who could assist in this process? Could we create some summer jobs for some of our dual language students to go out into the neighborhoods? And could we create some places other than our schools to fill out the paperwork and work with some community partners in the neighborhoods that have been identified where we have the most difficult time getting kids to school and started on time? So let's dig a little deeper and see what we can do with the data that tells us where these kids are. Let's use our own students and get them involved in the process of helping in their neighborhoods to find the kids that need to be enrolled in school.
Trustee Marks.
And how are we rolling this out? Just at the school sites and informing the parents at the school site that these changes are coming next year? Is that the?
Well, I've already met with all the assistant principals.
Yeah.
I met with all the principals. I met with all the clerical who handle permits. I met with all the data entry clerks who do it. So I'm going through all the staff.
Right.
And then we mail letters home we mail out letters every January.
Right.
And I don't know, if you have kids in the district, remember getting those letters about the permits. And in the new letter, it was a simple change. Instead of saying start at the school of residence, I say, first of all, I say you can find a permit. Any school in the district has it, or go to the CWA webpage, and I give instructions how to get to it. Because for now, unless we have the webpage updated by the time the letters go out in January, so I don't know if it'll be updated to find permits. And then basically the letter explains to parents the steps. Just get the form, turn it into the school where you want to go, and the deadline for intra is February 14th, Valentine's Day. So remember that date.
That's great. That was good. Oh, that sounds good.
So there's a letter that goes out, and then we do an auto dial also.
Okay, good.
So that's how we'll let the families know.
And they do their language of preference on those, and it'll go out.
Yeah, the letters are Spanish and English. The auto dial is Spanish, English, and then the other languages, it gets trickier. But
I know. Yeah, I was wondering.
we work with them. That's where they bring in their teenage kids, or they bring in translators.
Okay, that's.
But I'll make sure none of those families get left behind.
I know you won't.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
All right, seeing no more lights. Questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, back to the board for comments. Seeing none, Mr. Miller, thank you very much for your report.
Okay, thank you very much.
I have a request for a quick 10-minute break. We've sort of been going since 4 o'clock in some shape, form, or fashion, so let's take 10.
close my heart to scores. I used to be great at it. I used to get all A's. I was dominant. Yeah. So Kobe. Quickly finish this one up.
I just call it. People made it, yeah.
A lot of people were like, hey, I wish I could go, but I don't want to get in trouble. Because apparently a bunch of math teachers were telling their kids they were coming tonight. And I was like, okay, probably next. I've seen nobody. Man in blue.
Does that guy have a word to say about MVP?
I like how they say, if 10 minutes, start the timer. Great job, guys.
And I'll take it. They got food in the car.
Sure.
Whatever. I don't know how much food.
Oh, thank goodness.
You had the timer set up and she was pressing, so I was about to throw that on, but it's okay. It's okay. I was gonna throw that on. I was like, okay, that'd be a nice transition, you know, because he said 2 minutes.
Don't worry, I share.
I've had a card. Display. The replacement. Well, this thing's pretty clear. She wasn't in today though. Turned down. Might be. I don't know. She said she had it.
You don't have a post-it note on your arm or anything, right? She has something on her computer. No. I don't see it.
Keep my eye out. It might be on the ground
I
somewhere.
know.
I mean, we could just reset it.
Yeah.
Or just have her make it just a little bit different.
I'll let her know.
Maybe, if Navy wins, I'll wear the Navy tie. If Army wins, you can wear the Army tie. You know what? I don't know how well they do it.
I guess that somebody probably picked it up and threw it away.
We have the special board meetings on the same
That's not my shade.
Uh-oh, sorry. Yeah, yours is a little pinker.
Yes, I like a little more pink to mine.
None. Yeah, I didn't either. Yes. Yeah. And such reference. Amazing.
Next presentation is all you.
Yes.
Did you call it? Marky Mark. Oh, tomorrow, Rich got land working on the, he's working on it Look at you in your orange. My favorite color. Yeah, beautiful on you. how does it work?
This is next slide and this is back slide.
Okay. All right. Let's see how this goes. It's my first one.
Is it?
Mm-hmm.
Good luck.
Thanks.
You'll be fine.
Thanks.
All right.
Let's go.
All right, guys, let's see if we can get across the finish line here. This is my last official version in this seat, so we're going to get through this finish line and we're going to celebrate that we survived a year. Ms. Marcus, B5, ROTC, JROTC.
Yes.
B4, something. I spent many, many years in JROTC.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, President Walker, trustees, Dr. Noguchi, and cabinet members. My name is Rachel Barkas. I'm the Senior Director of Educational Options, and I'm very excited to present to you the JROTC program that we have starting at Byer High School. And if I can figure out how to work this, there we go. Okay, the purpose of tonight's board report is to introduce the district's plan to implement an Army JROTC program at Byer High School beginning in the 2020-2021 school year. I'm also going to give you the general information regarding JROTC programs and the next steps that we have this year. The district goal alignment, the JROTC program does align with District Goal 1 and specifically Goal 1.2, which is to increase students being identified as prepared in the college and career indicators. So what is Army JROTC? It is a student-focused program that teaches students the value of citizenship, leadership, service to community, personal responsibility, and self-discipline. It is a 4-year high school program. It is an elective class offering. However, in some districts, they do identify it as a PE offering as well. Students learn about civics, geography, global awareness, health and wellness, ELA, life skills, and U.S. history. One of the questions that's often posed in regards to a JROTC program is, do they have to join the military? And the answer is no. There's no obligation to join the military. They obviously know more about the military than most students, but they do not have to join. They can, go to college. They can choose a career afterwards, whatever path they choose. Students who do decide to join the military will join at a higher rank. So there's that benefit. In addition, students may also earn a higher rank in the senior ROTC program, which is a college-based program, if they choose to go to a college that offers that opportunity. Next question is, does JROTC help students go to a college? Well, students do learn about college and other educational and employment opportunities going through the program. It improves students' ability to study, take tests, set goals, and focus. Leadership, teamwork, and effective communication are the primary focal areas, and they are eligible for ROTC scholarships to support them in going to a college. We did visit Ripon High School, and there they were doing their leadership class for JROTC was focused on time management and a plan that they were going to execute for a community service opportunity. And so to watch the students go through that, it was very clear that they were learning how to have detailed work, how to have the time management, how to work together as a team, and how to have focused outcomes. And it was very impressive to watch them work. So it definitely does get them ready for college or career in those areas. Do they have to wear uniforms 1 day a week? They're required to wear uniforms once a week at special events or ceremonies. The rest of the time, they just wear normal clothing, just like any other student. Are there any special fees for participating in JROTC? No, there are not. The Army, through the contract, the Army actually supports the program and provides all the different materials, their uniforms, the supplies, and all equipment. So there is no cost to students, no cost to the district for implementing this particular program. Who teaches JROTC? It is retired Army personnel. Army JROTC program, they certify the instructors, and the instructors have to be veterans with an honorable discharge, and they have to have at least 20 years of active duty. and they can have been retired for less than 5 years. So they have to be newly retired from the branch of the military that they're supporting. We do hire the instructors. The Army JROTC program certifies the instructors that they have the qualifications to meet the criteria for being an instructor, but then we actually are the ones that hire from the pool that they provide. A typical week for a JROTC candidate would be physical training, a day of curriculum, uniforms, another day of curriculum, and then physical training. So that's typically what their week is going to look like. They have a lot of different co-curricular activities outside of the classroom. Military drill competitions. They have a Raider Challenger competition, which is an athletic event where they can compete against other JROTC members. They have Leadership and Academic Bowl. They have a STEM camp, which is a week-long residential camp open for 9th and 10th grade students. And then they have the Cadet Leadership Challenge. In addition, they also are often seen in parades, at board meetings presenting colors, and other special events. So why do we choose the Army for Modesto City Schools? Modesto City Schools is one of the largest school districts in the county without some form of JROTC program. We have established community need. In fact, we've been working on a facilities grant to improve facilities for this program as it goes to Bayer. And we've received numerous letters of support in the implementation of this program from community board members, teachers, students, parents, really just the Josh Harder's office. He's actually one that really assisted us in getting this off the ground. So we have lots of community support, and we're very excited about the opportunity that we have here. In addition, the state accountability system on the California Data Dashboard, it does there is an indicator on the CCI, on the College and Career Indicator, that shows military leadership. So if a student takes 2 courses during their high school career, in addition to having SBAC scores that are a 3 or a 2, they will be identified as prepared on the College and Career Indicator. Some of the benefits is, as we said, or as I said, the cadets enter the military at a higher rank. They teach the student leadership skills that are transferable for the rest of their life, and they learn communication and other 21st century skills. So our current process and planning, as Dr. Noguchi stated earlier, this has been months of planning. Our next steps, however, are the hiring of the JROTC instructors. We are writing a JROTC instructor job description that will be different than our general job description for teachers in the classroom due to the extra duties that are required. So that should be coming through the pipeline here pretty soon. In addition, our next step is to recruit for the Bayer High School program. We're doing that through a number of different strategies. One is we are going to be offering this district-wide. So I've met with all the administrators, and it is going to be on every single high school's ballot. So there's going to be a district-wide push or offering so that everybody knows that it's actually going to be happening in our district, and then they can apply for that inter-district transfer that Mr. Miller was talking about. Also been working with Krista to get the word out. So once we've done this presentation, we are going to have a parent and community night, looking at the 3rd week of vacation. So the 1st week of January, to hold this at Bayer High School and present this opportunity to all parents and community, open it up to everybody. And then, those are the main ways that we're planning on recruiting. And then the next step after that is the course outlines, the program sequencing, and getting this on the master schedule. I am now open for questions.
Trustee Lopez, or Trustee, we'll work backwards.
Yeah. Now, thank you for the presentation. So you mentioned the inter district transfer. So is this program gonna be an all-day thing, or will this be? I know there's ROTC, if I'm not mistaken, what's ROP classes currently where people can go in for 1 or 2 periods and then come back to their home school. So this is going to be, I'm guessing, a full day. You're gonna now going to Bayer all day, right?
Correct. Yes, that's the plan.
He stole my question and her question. I'll think about it for a minute while somebody else goes.
Okay.
Trustee Irvin.
Yes, yes, yes. I'd just like to say this has been, years. I originally, when I was with the district, actually approached Jeff Albrecht, and after approaching district staff when I was here at the district office, saying we need to get a JROTC program. And when I was kind of like, yeah, whatever, John, I went to Jeff, who was the inaugural principal. I said, well, maybe if it comes from the principal. But Jeff, like he told me, they had already had their programs established for Grigori when it was under construction and things like that. So I thought in futility, it was back then. Full circle coming here, sitting over there for the interview to fill the board seat. When they asked, what would you like to accomplish? The thing I said was a JROTC program. And so, in relentless and thanking our superintendent, going to our one-on-ones and asking me, I would like to see a JROTC program here. Yes. And so when the letters went out and we got done, and we got the rejection letters, I approached Congressman Josh Harder and said, hey, can you help us out here? Because we were the largest in the country that didn't have a JROTC program. One of the youth I mentor actually goes to Edison High School, who was in the JROTC program there. And I'm just thankful and really appreciative that we have now embarked and can now say we're not the largest school district in the country that don't have a JROTC program. We have come and it has arrived. I even had, back then, when Grigori, I had even already recruited a teacher, a friend of mine who was a West Point graduate. He was actually teaching in the Tracy district and said, hey, I'll come over and be part of JROTC, but it was not to happen back then. So here we are. Here we are. I am just thankful.
Good.
Thankful. I don't even know what to say anymore, but thankful, thankful. It's going to do a lot of good for our students.
Yes, it is.
It's going to do a lot of opportunities. It's just great. Thank you. Thank you. Work.
Trustee Brown.
So, John, I salute you for your energy on this one. Thank you. And Rachel, thank you for all the effort to put this together and pull it together. So I'm excited to see this happen. I know we've got great support from the community for this. So a couple of questions for you. You mentioned how we're going to recruit from each of our school sites. And I'm curious, are we also going to be recruiting at all of the feeder junior high and middle school sites?
That's a very good question. We hadn't really explored that option, but it will be on all of the ballots for our incoming freshmen at all of our schools. So in that sense, yes. But I can add that to our list that on 8th grade parent night, we need to be presenting this as well as an opportunity.
Great. And then also, if you could help us understand, I know there's different credentialing requirements for instructors that teach in our CTE programs. Can you tell us how that works? That isn't someone with a full teaching credential, but how is it that they can teach in our district?
So the state of California has identified several different areas, both in CTE, and then JROTC is actually a completely separate one. And so under their parameters, they've set out criteria that you must meet in order to get that particular credential. It has to be vetted by the Army is one of the requirements, which is why it's advertised on the Army website first, and then we advertise and select from within that pool. But it is through the California State Commission on Credentialing Office that they have to apply.
And to piggyback, does the Army contribute to their salary?
Yes. So we have an upfront cost of the salary for the teachers, and they reimburse us 50% of the base salary is the agreement for 2 teachers.
Mm-hmm. So then, to your point, to answer the other side, and if I'm wrong, you can correct me, but the example on the CTE side that wouldn't be ROTC is for, on my gig, which is computer science, 4,000 hours of work experience and the degrees to go with it, and they'll give me a little checkboxy thing I had great instructors. I had a colonel, retired colonel, and a retired first sergeant. And it made a huge difference. And you do go in because everybody else in basic training started out at E0. I had E2, which had me almost to PFC before anybody had done anything. And it really does provide that background because while they were learning to march, I already knew how to march. We'd already done through drills and instructions and formations and things like that that made that process much easier. But it was also just an amazing experience because you're in your hut, whatever it was. I was actually on a military base. And so that was very different because back then Germany was two Germanys. It was West and East. And so we were on a military base in West Germany, and so that's where we did it. We had all the equipment, and you had instructors for days, and it was just a lot of fun because you're out there with folks that want to do the same sort of things. And the military history in the background is invaluable because we should all know a bit more about all those different things that happened back in the past. And I'm excited. Maybe we can figure out a way to get to Trustee Lopez's piece once we get a year or so in and figure out a way to ROP it, where you jump over there for a couple hours and jump back, because that's something that we've taken advantage of, certainly on the culinary program, because my daughter's gone 4 hours at Johansson, then she's back the rest of the day at Enoch's. Whether it's possible or not, I don't know, but maybe the other thought is we find another colonel and another first sergeant. Or we get Trustee Irvin some Navy ROTC or something.
That would be great. That's a good plan.
Because then we'll go. And then to the question you asked, if you want to know how my vote flipped to you for trustee, it was the ROTC answer. Because when we're sitting up here, I'm making notes. That was my big checkbox going, yes. So if there are no other questions, I'll go out to the public. Questions and comments from the public. Seeing none, back to the board for comments.
I was waiting for the comment time, but hey, this is awesome. I'm so thrilled that we're going to be able to do this, and having two who've served in the military up here on the board, I think that's the first time on the board that we've had that, and then to be able to have this program during this time is awesome. So thank you for all the hard work you did, and John, and contacting Congressman Harder's office and just going through all the steps to be able to make it so we can do it. So it's awesome. I know our students are going to benefit from that, and the public will be so thrilled to see this as well. So thank you so much.
Sure.
Seeing none, thank you, Ms. Marcus. That takes us to B6. Approval of proposed revisions to Board Bylaw 9111, 9150, student member and student board members. Welcome. This is a first.
Good evening, President Walker, President Marks, Board, Dr. Noguchi, and Cabinet. Tonight, I am here to present the proposed revisions to Board Bylaw 9150, Student Board Members, which was revised from Board Bylaw 9111, Student Member. Revisions include feedback from former student rep to the board, Shelby Benz, and our current student rep to the board, Arnov. They felt it was important to express that the student board member is expected to attend all board meetings and is encouraged to attend other district meetings regarding programs and initiatives. Those were two of the major changes into the policy. Other than that, there were minor revisions to the policy and the exhibit, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, questions from fellow board members. Everybody work everything out on this one? Seeing no questions, out to the public for questions or comments. Seeing none, back to the board for comments. Trustee Newman, if I'm patient, somebody will hit a light.
Thank you. I just want to thank staff for, on the exhibit, just want to point out something that came through a different draft. It excluded a board member from serving on the committee for the selection of the student representative. And I think that's important to have that. And otherwise, I'm going to make a motion that we approve with the exhibit because we added that. The exhibit is referenced in the board bylaw, but wasn't put into our agenda sequentially. It was at the end at F something. So we moved it up there at the beginning of the meeting to this agenda. So I'd move for approval with the exhibit attached.
Trustee Marks has a question, then I'll get your second, and I've got a first, but go.
So I just want to make a comment to ensure that that our student rep votes first. 'Cause we haven't had him do
Okay.
that much, so it's time. he gets
I'd like
an
to see him seconded too.
That'd be great.
Yes, I would agree. I mean, I think it's our first time with a student board member writing a policy. And it contributes to our completion of the board bylaw. So I have a motion here. You're gonna second, trustee? Board member Arnov. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously
With the student preference.
with the student's preferential vote and the exhibits included.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, this takes us to what's now called B7A. Approval of the first reading proposed draft of board policy BP 5146, married pregnant parenting students, deletion of current MCS BP 5146.1, married students, and current MCS BP 5146.2, pregnant students. Ms. Barkus, you're back so quick.
Yes, I am.
Where's yours?
So basically, the two original board policies date back to 1982. So we've had a few laws change, both
No.
Ed Code and the state of California. And so the changes are numerous, just to have it updated to, like I said, both Ed Code and state law. Do I have any questions? Can I answer any questions for you?
I think the only one I would have is because I have a cousin whose daughter came back to Modesto City Schools because of our program supporting pregnant students. And she was able to have her student with her as she finished and did credit recovery and graduated. So I am a huge supporter of this whole concept. Does any of the new changes negatively impact anything we're doing now
No.
to support these students?
No. And I would say that it increases the support that we have for these students.
That's all I need to know because I've got a cousin who is graduated, fully credited, and recovered because of our programs, and her family had gone to school in Modesto, so they came back here because of our programs, and that's a good thing in my mind. Trustee Newman. Your light, okay, so your light's fake.
That was me.
Oh, Cindy, I can't see that far, I'm getting old. Trustee Marks.
This is really helpful. It gives a lot of more structure to what we're doing already, and I appreciate just having it all laid out like this. Our program is phenomenal. If none of us, those of us who've viewed it, it's really amazing all the work that they do. So I noticed that this was something that I don't recall ever having, but in F, Board Policy 5146, page F. I don't know what page it is on the screen, but it'll be up at the top. It'll say F on the right-hand side. But anyway, that last paragraph, it says that the superintendent designee shall periodically report to the board regarding the effectiveness of the district strategies to support married and pregnant and parenting students. So we haven't done that before, so I'm just believing that this is going to be incorporated like once a year, or I just didn't know how that was going to happen. But it would be great to hear how many students we have and how many children are in our program, and just how well they're doing, how many are planning to graduate that year, and whatever data is collected. I don't really know what the data is that's collected on that. Thank you. Okay.
Trustee Brown.
So just a question, are we able to support these students at each one of our high schools?
No. We have programs strategically placed around the district to support students so they don't have to move too far from their home school. We do have transportation provided for them, but we do not have one at every site. We have not established a program at every site.
And another question, it says parenting students. So this includes not only the mother, but also the father of a child if they want to participate in those programs.
I do not have the answer for that, so I'm going to need to find out.
I will tell you that my cousin, boyfriend, they both went to Elliott together. So he transferred in, she transferred in, she had the baby, and they continued trucking along at Elliott until they both graduated. So for what that's worth, at least my life experience said that yes, we supported both of them, and I would expect that we would just because we're good peoples.
That's the law that's requiring us to change the board policy, because we had something that talked about our services, but it has to be inclusive of both parents.
Woo woo.
Could you repeat that? Could you repeat that into the microphone so that those watching the public can hear us? Thank you. All right. thank
So in my experience, we had the same exact type of board policy that had to go before the board again because of our federal audit. And it must be inclusive for both genders, both parents, that they could participate because we do have single fathers that need the same resources as our single mothers.
Trustee Newman now. I was just early before.
Sorry. Just to piggyback on Trustee Brown's question, so if we have a student, I'm guessing Enox is one that doesn't have a program that would
Correct.
support pregnant students. Okay, just a good guess there. So if the student is at Enox and they want to stay at Enox, is that the student's choice? I kind of read this as that we would have to accommodate them wherever they are.
The student can stay wherever they choose to go to school. We don't exclude them from choice.
Right.
But if they want to access these different classes, then they have to go to the school voluntarily to access the classes.
So could a student, a pregnant or parenting student at Enox, just access them like we would an ROP type thing, access some of it, or would they only be able to access if they were a student at that school?
Another good question. I will find out.
I didn't think of it earlier because your question prompted it, so it's really his fault.
One of the schools,
Thank you. Yeah.
Mo High is one of them.
Right.
I know Elliott does it because Elliott's Elliott.
And Downey.
So it's Mo High
And
and
Downey,
Downey.
yeah. So we have it at 3 of our sites. We have it at Modesto High, Downey, and Elliott.
Correct.
These support services, but a student that is pregnant or parenting at our other schools, there's still law that applies that we would have to accommodate them, but it's these special parenting programs would only be available at the other sites.
Correct.
Is that the way it works? Okay. That makes sense.
All right. I'm not seeing any more lights, so I will go out to the public for comment. Questions or comments from the public? Seeing none, back to the board. Looking for a motion to approve BP 519. Flip the page. So moved. Just looking for a second. Trustee Marks. All those in favor, aye. Aye. Unanimously passes. Thank you, Ms. Vargas.
Thank you.
That brings us to B7B, which I believe is D4, which is going to be
D3.
D3, which is approval of proposed draft AR 5145.13, response to immigration enforcement. I believe this was Mr. Irvin's callback.
Yeah, I just wanted to,
I will let y'all converse.
Good evening.
yes, good evening. I just wanted to see if we could add in there, because on the second page there, flipped over, A, where it says down, all visitors and outsiders, including immigration enforcement officers, shall register with the principal or designee upon entering the school grounds during school hours. So I think we should have something in there that says where do they go if we got after school programs at all of our schools. Who do they contact in that event they were after school, in our after school program, they come in and they want to see a student or something like that. Who is the person or designee of the superintendent after school?
Good point.
So if that could be added or to that.
We can look to adjust that.
Yeah.
Or the designee. We could
Take off school hours.
during
Yeah.
school hours, remove those words during school hours. Okay.
I guess the one question I would have there, because I've thought about it reviewing the great big binder of policies we're looking at, it's like this thick. Our school visitor program now essentially has you taking your driver's license and popping it into a machine. And so that's not necessarily going to be available after hours, because I thought about something similar with those policies that'll come up, because you're at a football game or a water polo thing or something after school, you're just sort of on campus. You're not, if I'm not mistaken there, right?
Yeah, you're right.
Right.
I like the suggestion. I don't know if this goes to what you're going at, Trustee Irvin, but I think elimination of the during school hours and that they will just check in with the principal or designee upon entering school grounds would be consistent with what I believe our
Yeah.
procedures typically are now.
Trustee Newman's gonna jump in here.
So, say somebody in the scenario we gave is there, we've got a water polo game. So they would go into the front office first. That would be what we anticipate. Okay, the front office is closed, so they go straight to the pool. There's probably somebody there that they would check in with, and then they'd call the principal.
Yeah, there's typically an administrator at our athletic events or after
Right.
school events, so they would check in with that person. That would be the designee.
It sounds like that would work.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just tricky because we've gone electronic. And I think certainly I spoke with Mr. Zerly about how we would do this sort of a kiosky thing. But again, that doesn't apply after hours because it's in the office. And so it makes it a little bit trickier if we're using the electronics, so we're looking to remove during school hours. Everybody okay with that? So I believe we will go out to the public and see if anybody in the public disagrees with during school hours. All right, I got a thumbs up out there. We're feeling good. Back to the board for comments. So we're looking for a motion to pass what number this is, immigration policy.
5145.13.
5145.13 with the proposed change to remove during school hours. I have a motion. I'm looking for a second. I'll second it. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. That gets me off of the AB, gets me down to B8. Approval of the first reading of draft board policy 6145, extracurricular and co-curricular activities. Mr. Godot, your floor is yours.
Thank you, President Walker. Board of Trustees, Dr. Noguchi, I am here on behalf of Mr. Nelson to report out on our approval of the first reading proposed draft board policy BP 6145, extracurricular and co-curricular activities. You'll note that that is pretty much boilerplate CSBA language out of Gamut that is moving forward as a board policy proposal for Modesto City Schools. So I'm open for questions or...
Okay. Trustee Brown has a light going.
So if I understand from my reading, there's no allowance for any club to have any dues or fees. All extracurricular and co-curricular activities have to be cost-free to the student. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, can you jump in here, Trustee Newman?
I just have one little typo, and I was just trying to find it. Okay, it's on the bottom of page 3. The very last word should be policies, and it's plural form, but they forgot the S.
Duly noted.
And then I had a question too. When we did this, when we had a big discussion on this, co-curricular versus extracurricular, and getting rid of our citizenship requirement for our extracurricular involvement. This was a big move by this board. I don't know when that was. It was maybe 2012, 2013. It was some time ago. But I think it was great because I think that we the more students are engaged in school, the better it is. But we spent a lot of time going over the definition of co-curricular and extracurricular, and I noticed that definition wasn't in here anymore. So that was a big, because there is no differentiation under this policy, as I read it, that citizenship doesn't come into play for co-curricular or extracurricular, right?
For co-curricular.
For co-curricular.
I would have to refer to the student conduct code to see about the citizenship for extra, but
so like dances and things like that would be extracurricular, and co-curricular
receive a grade.
You receive a grade. So you're in a sport, that's co-curricular, and you are in a club, that's extracurricular.
Yes.
Okay.
Those will be examples of both.
Okay. All right. Okay. So for extracurricular and co-curricular activities, are we taking out the requirement by this policy that you would need to have, do you need to adhere to the citizenship Or no?
This board policy would not remove anything that we have in place. It's just outlining the cans and can'ts as far as you can't restrict access to a co or extracurricular activity based on race or based on, you know, other things that are protected by law. It
Okay.
does allow the board the flexibility to create eligibility standards based on the board.
So citizenship could still come into play. Like if a student has not been a good citizen and they're getting a bunch of U's in their classes, they can't go get a ticket to the prom. That's still in place because I think that's our rule right now.
Would you define what citizenship you're talking about? Are you talking about behavior? Like
Yeah, we have a citizenship grade.
Okay, I thought you were talking about being a citizen of the United States.
Oh, no,
That was the previous policy.
I was having some questions. Okay, so it's a behavior
You don't
piece.
ask those questions. No, the citizenship in the grade and the high school, it's outstanding, satisfactory, or unsatisfactory, and right, and we got rid of that requirement that they maintain certain level of citizenship for our co-curricular activities. But my question, I guess, going back on it, my question is, and I think you've answered it, is that we still have the requirement. Am I getting confused here, or are we confused?
Can I?
Am I right?
Co-curricular, there is not a citizenship component regarding eligibility.
Right.
For extracurricular, there are components, I believe, of different activities that still have a citizenship requirement. This board policy would not negate anything that's currently in place.
So and I'm going to come to you in just a second, Trustee Marks, because now I'm all sideways and wrapped up in bows here. If I understand correctly, how would this scenario fall in? Because you have extracurricular activities where you take a road trip. The example I would use would be marching band or color guard, because that's what my children do. If you get into a disciplinary issue that goes back to the student handbook, then theoretically you could not necessarily be participating in a road trip or a color guard or a marching band sort of thing because of discipline. That's different than citizenship, or the same? Because am I making sense there?
In the code of conduct, extracurricular activities, examples are provided, recreation at 7-8, clubs 9-12, field trips 9-12, dances 7-8, and assemblies 7-8 are all examples of extracurricular that do include, GPA below a 2.0 and eligible, more than one F, more than one U citizenship. There is common language regarding eligibility when it comes to home suspension for both co-curricular and extracurricular. So, for example, if you're suspended for bringing a substance to school that you're not supposed to have, and you get a 5-day suspension, then you're ineligible for a period of 9 weeks.
Right, or you do sort of the classroom thing. You take a class and you come back and re-review, and life is good, and you've learned your lesson.
I believe it's 18 reduced to 9 if you go through the program.
All right, good enough. I'm squared up. I understand. Trustee Marks.
I have a question about on the first page, the second paragraph, the last sentence says no. I just want to understand, what does this mean? No extracurricular or co-curricular program or activity shall be provided or conducted separately on the basis of any actual or perceived characteristic listed as a prohibited category or of discrimination in state or federal law, nor shall any student's participation in any extracurricular or co-curricular activity be required or refused on those bases. And they only reference the sexual harassment because the other ones have NAs by them. So I wasn't, what is that? Do you know what that means? I was like, oh my gosh, I have no idea what this means.
I didn't catch where it was in the which page?
It's the very first page of the extracurricular and co-curricular activities, BP 6145. Second paragraph starts with prerequisites. Last sentence starts with no extracurricular co-curricular program. Right? There it is. That's it.
So, for example, if there is an LGBTQ club, you can't make a requirement that you have to identify as LGBTQ to be involved in that. Extrapolate that to any number of different activities. You can't create things with a prerequisite of being a
Right.
blah, fill in the blank. It's access for all, right? So, with the exception, very few exceptions. And
So
I think-
does it also refer to sports? So on sports, so it would refer to sports, is this correct? So are those extracurricular activities? Are they co-curricular?
They're covered by both. The language there is extracurricular and co-curricular.
So my question is about a student that's born a male playing on a girls' volleyball team. So is this saying that we're saying this is okay?
Depending on which gender they identify as, that would, yes.
Okay. So as my own view, I am voting no on this, on that basis, because I am opposed to male students, birth male students, playing on a female team. I just feel it puts others at risk in some ways. And I'm looking for the safety of all of our students. And so when I look at that, it's a hard decision, but I also sympathize with students that are struggling in many ways. So that's my point. So when I vote no, you'll at least be aware. So I just wanted to clarify it, because it's very clear in the AR, but it wasn't very clear in this one, in the board policy.
Okay. So, which gets me back to the only question I had, which is we do have an existing AR. And so I guess the one thing I would have you guys sort of make sure is that the BP and the AR are in sync. Because the AR is not up for approval, it was pre-existing. And so we're passing a BP. BP's trump ARs, but let's at least take a drive-by.
We did vote on the AR. It's
Okay, I'm just making sure, because if you update this, just take a look at the dates and keep on chugging. So other than that, I've got nothing here.
The AR was in consent tonight.
yes.
Okay.
And I pulled it off to vote no.
Roger.
Okay.
Just keep it up. Okay, out to the public for comment, questions. Seeing none. Back to the board for a motion to approve. I almost got to the 6. Looking for a second. Trustee Lopez, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no.
No.
Passes 6-1 with student preferential vote. That gets us to the last one, which is the easiest one on the board. 5B9, approval of the first reading of proposed draft board policy 5145.3, non-discrimination and harassment. We just did this one. I believe if my history is correct, we're adding a word in a bunch of places. Mr.
Thank
Henderson.
you, Trustee Walker. Good evening, trustees. Board Policy 5145.3, non-discrimination harassment's up for consideration. Revisions to this were previously approved at the June 3rd board meeting. Subsequent to that meeting, we had additional changes in order to bring the policy into alignment with the upcoming FPM compliance audit. And the changes include 3 things. Number 1, modifying the title to be consistent with the CSBA title for the same board policy. Number 2, adding an additional protected characteristic, that is medical condition, was not in there previously. And third, updating the identification of, in the AR, designated compliance officers and their contact information, which you'll find in that corresponding AR in the consent. And that's, again, a requirement for FPM. Last was some numbering things that we caught to make consistent. So that concludes the changes that you've previously seen and approved in this board policy, and it's recommended you approve it.
Hey, that's the easiest board policy update in the history of man. Especially since we already looked at it. So, let me go out here and come back. Seeing no lights and no questions, out to the public for questions and comments. Seeing none, back to the board for a motion. I have a motion from Trustee Brown, looking for a second. Trustee or Lopez. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye, passed unanimously. Okay, that brings us to the end of the road. My last full meeting as board president. That's it. Any questions, board members with future agenda item requests? Seeing none, looking for a motion to adjourn?
So moved?
Looking for a second? Second. All in favor, aye. Done. Out.
Good job, John.
Last hurrah.
Good job. Congratulations.